Ready? Hello, everyone, and welcome back to CSE's live chat. I am Sukanya Nair, and today we are turning our attention to an issue that has truly reached an alarming point, and that is the collapse of the world's coral reef. We have with us today Dakshiani and Himanshu from Down to Earth. Thank you so much, guys, for joining.
Thanks.
And they have recently worked on a cover story, which is quite a major cover story on the collapse of coral reefs, and they will be talking about that in detail. So, Himanshu, let's get started with you. Let Before we get into the crisis at all, I mean, let's step back a little, and if you could just explain to us why are coral reefs so important, or why are corals important, and why it is such a critical part of the marine system or marine ecosystem.
So corals are basically animals, and they are also called as the rainforests of the oceans. So a lot of um, biodiversity and ecosystem it depends on them. A quarter of marine species depend on corals for their sustenance in terms of habitat, food, and breeding and other things. And also, almost 1 billion people, directly or indirectly, depend on corals for their livelihood. So people who are living close to the coastal areas, directly working in the sea or oceans, or otherwise also.
Okay. So now we do understand that they are a central part of the marine ecosystem. But if we have to talk about a little bit about how they are threatened today, and so why are they really dying? I mean, what happened all of a sudden? And it will be also great if you could tell us a little bit about the extent of the bleaching that we are seeing globally.
So yes, so that's the reason why we did this story on, because corals are undergoing fourth global mass bleaching event at present. So it started in 2023,
Okay.
and it's still ongoing. And nearly 84.4% of coral reefs have been exposed to high level of heat stress in the oceans. So that's why. And in many parts, it's been reported that many coral reef system are under threat, and many of them have also reported decline. For example, in Florida.
Mhm.
So this is basically because a recent report, also Global Tipping Points, which was released, I think a couple of months ago, says that Earth temperatures have reached 1.4 degrees Celsius above the pre-industrial
Levels.
levels.
Right.
So, and with this, and the threshold levels of corals is between 1 and 1.5. So that's why these bleaching events are becoming more and more
Frequent.
frequent, and that is what it is threatening, and that will directly impact humans and marine life as well.
Okay. Dashi, maybe I'll loop you in now. So we do see that these are no longer a standalone event when we can see it across. So what, according to you, I mean, now the next part would be, of course, to talk solutions. So what are scientists really doing to save these coral reefs?
Sure. So if I can just add a little bit to what Himanshu said. So bleaching essentially occurs when corals are stripped of their color. That is, they are stripped of the symbionts, the algae and the bacteria that are in a symbiotic relationship with the coral itself. And that affects their nutrition, their reproduction, and they die off eventually. So globally, when you look at the reefs ecosystems, entire reef ecosystems, which are made of maybe tens or hundreds of corals of all different species. So habitat protection, which is essentially trying to safeguard the reef area from warming, from pollution, that is what most policies look at, most scientists look at. But what we also wanted to do through this cover story was talk about some very active interventions that scientists are taking, not for the entire reefs, but for the individual organism that is a coral. It is a living animal, like
Right.
Himanshu said. So we have covered three active interventions, which are cryopreservation, outplanting, and assisted evolution. So
Sorry, go on. I was just going to
sorry.
ask, it will be great if you could also explain what
Yes, of course. So cryopreservation, if I were to explain it in the simplest way possible, is like IVF for corals.
Okay.
So when bleaching occurs, their reproduction gets affected, and you have different coral species. So the genetic diversity is at threat as well. So through cryopreservation, scientists are collecting specimens of different coral species, and they are freezing them in a bank just like we would do during IVF.
Right.
And they are also trying to ensure that the breeding occurs between the coral spawn so that newer offspring and stronger offspring, like the generations keep multiplying. And then outplanting is very straightforward. So it's basically like creating coral nurseries. You
Okay.
go to areas where bleaching events have occurred, and then you find fragments that may have survived bleaching events, which means they're showing some resilience to the heat threats. And you give them a frame or a platform, so the something that they can attach themselves into, and they can keep growing in their natural environment. So that's outplanting.
Okay.
And then the third, assisted evolution, which I mean, if you ask me, it's quite fascinating. It's one of the most fascinating scientific strategies I've ever seen. So, assisted evolution is essentially you're looking at the coral individual and you're trying to inject heat resilience into it. So, how you're doing that is by breeding more heat resilient corals with maybe slightly lesser ones so that you have stronger offspring. And then you're also taking corals in the lab and you're exposing them to different heat levels so that they are conditioned to be more heat tolerant. And you're also looking at the symbionts, the algae and the bacteria, and you are finding ones that are naturally more heat resilient, and you're trying to get them to get attached to corals so that you have stronger corals overall.
It's truly fascinating.
Yeah.
Dakshi, I do have a related question. So,
Mhm.
can you also tell us where are these efforts being taken place, and do you really see any on ground level? Are scientists really seeing any real success?
Yeah, sure. So these efforts are actually happening globally at different scales. Obviously, you have the Great Barrier Reef, which is the
Right.
largest reef ecosystem in the world. So they are doing a lot of these strategies. And a lot of the scientists we have spoken to for this cover story are working for the Great Barrier Reef as well. But then you also have outplanting, which is a very straightforward method, and it can be replicated with a few tweaks in different geographies. So the organizations we've spoken to, they have done it in Indonesia, in the Maldives, in Kenya, in the Caribbean. So and it's actually, if I were to just sum it up, I'd say it's a global effort. It's happening in different scales across all geographies wherever the reef systems are present, and they need some protection.
All right.
And about the levels of success, also, I'd say it's quite varying. Like outplanting again, the you can plant the corals and you can plant maybe thousands of corals at once, and they're able to grow and they're able to form new networks. But there's only an extent at which you can protect them from bleaching. If a bleaching event occurs, there is maybe not that much you can do to save them. But then when you come look at the heat resilience efforts like cryopreservation and like assisted evolution, they are showing some good results, but it's maybe at a smaller scale. It's maybe not at a scale where we're saying that globally we are just deploying heat resilient corals everywhere.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Do you guys have any concluding remarks before I close the session?
Yeah, if I can paraphrase directly from the story, one scientist put it very nicely when they said that, coral conservation is like a three-legged stool. So the first one is you have habitat protection, which is a passive intervention. And then you have these scientific interventions, which is an active intervention. But then the stool will not be balanced unless you can stop global warming. I mean, we can't do that, I guess. But unless you can limit global warming, unless you can limit the warming of the ocean temperatures and take active measures to protect the ocean habitats, then probably the stool is not going to stay balanced.
I mean, to conclude, we can then
Yeah.
say that no matter how many corals we try to conserve or
Mhm.
even produce or plant more of them, it's not going to help unless we limit the global warming, right?
Yeah, I
Exactly.
would just like to add that this global tipping point report also says that it's kind of an emergency because we are entering into a new reality. Because the Earth, the Earth has reached its first catastrophic tipping point. So where we can see unprecedented diebacks of corals.
Okay.
And basically, tipping point is recognized by scientists, which is like a point of no return, and from where there can be irreversible damage
Thank
and
you.
back to corals, yes. So,
All right. Thank you so much, guys. And thank you so much, viewers, for watching. And if you have any questions, you can drop them in comments and our experts will get back to them soon. All right. Thanks again.
Thank you.
We'll be back with another episode of Live Chat. Until then, bye bye.
thank you. Bye.